Hey guys, welcome to Peripheral Vision, and today we're taking a look at the Maverick 2 for the Nintendo Entertainment System by Quickshot. Now, you cannot see the name Maverick 2 on this controller at all, but if you look on the back, you can see the model number is QS-128N. And if you look up that model number, you will see that the actual name of the controller is Maverick 2, which is super hardcore. And Quickshot does that a lot with its controllers. It gives them really cool names like the Maverick or the Conqueror or the Supercon, and I like that. I like that they have really cool names. It really helps to sell the product because back in the day when these were like in box on the shelves, the names that would sell would be the ones that were really cool, that would appeal to the young boy demographic, and Quickshot really pulled that off, so way to go, guys. And other than that, it's not really a terribly interesting controller. It's an arcade-ish stick for the NES, and there were a number of these. And take a closer look, it's got all the basic functions that these would normally have. You can see there is a switch for turbo. It's actually labeled as auto fire. If it's switched to the left, it's supposed to automatically fire, but it doesn't do that. It's just the turbo button, so you have to hold down the button. So that's kind of a mislabel. And on the other switch, there is player 1 and player 2. So if you have a two-player game, you can just switch from player 1, player 2. And you can see, there's the two inputs. What's kind of weird about this one is that usually the two wires that the controller connects to the system with are conjoined when it's a controller that can support two-player functionality. But these have two distinct controller cords, which is kind of a mess because it makes it a lot easier for them to get tangled, but it's not a terrible issue. Now, another thing with the cord is that this cord, when it's unwound, is actually very short. It's not terribly long. It's not as long as the NES Advantage or an NES controller proper. So that's something to take into account. It doesn't extend that far from the actual console. Now, back to the front, you can see that the start and select are on a toggle, and they're reversed, which is not really a good or bad thing, but something to note. And finally, we've got the slow motion, which you can turn on and off, and as I always explain, the slow motion just pauses the game rapidly. Now, if you have player 2 selected, if you're playing the player 2 portion of the game, you cannot use the slow motion. I don't know what it is about this controller, but if you have player 2 selected, the slow motion function will not work. But it doesn't really matter because the slow motion on this controller is kind of really bad. It pauses once in a while whenever it feels like. It doesn't really do even like normally slow motion isn't that effective to begin with, but this controller slow motion is completely useless. And we have the joystick. And the joystick works pretty well. It's nice. It's got a good sense of articulation and it's pretty sturdy. I like the color scheme of this. Even though it doesn't really fit with the NES, it's got these bright red and solid blue buttons and switches, and it's really dynamic. It really stands out. So I do like the aesthetic of it, and it's actually fairly small. You can almost hold it just like a regular controller, just with your thumb like here, and play it like this. So if you want to, you are able to do that. And you have this rest here for your wrist. It doesn't, for smaller hands or for younger children, this rest might be more effective, but for somebody who's an adult, it doesn't really work. And that's pretty much everything there is with the controller itself, except for one little detail, and it's the thing that the Maverick 2 does exceptionally well. The suction cups. And I know what you're thinking, they're just suction cups, and there's suction cups on pretty much every one of these arcade controllers, even ones past the NES, because it helps stabilize the controller. But these suction cups work astoundingly well, almost too well. Let's put it on the table and we'll show you. Put it on the table, press down to adhere the suction cups, and it will lift up the table before the suction cups will pop. So you will not move this controller unless you pry it off. You actually have to pop it off with some force. And it does that really effectively. It really sucks. Well, that's a good note to end on. Later days.